I have a cool, awesome guest tonight. Welcome, JB.
Sorry, I'm doing what the kids do. How's it going, Sabs? What's going on? What's good, everybody?
Oh, man. Oh, man. This one is about Sam SEDER, and apparently he went off. He attacked Joe Rogan, and he did it in the smuggest way. But first, I want to let you know that Joe Rogan did issue an apology. I don't think he should have apologized for anything, to be honest with you. It's his show. He can talk about whatever he wants, and you don't have to watch it. That's just how I see this. But I'm going to play his apology vid first, and then I'm going to play that vid from Sam SEDER. So let me share my screen.
I think there's a lot of people that have a distorted perception of what I do, maybe based on sound bites or based on headlines of articles that are disparaging. The podcast has been accused of spreading dangerous misinformation, specifically about 2 episodes, a little bit about some other ones, but specifically about 2. One with Dr. Peter McCullough and one with Dr. Robert Malone. Dr. Peter McCullough is a cardiologist, and he is the most published physician in his field in history. Dr. Robert Malone owns 9 patents on the creation of mRNA vaccine technology and is at least partially responsible for the creation of the technology that led to mRNA vaccines. Both these people are very highly credentialed, very intelligent, very accomplished people, and they have an opinion that's different from the mainstream narrative. I wanted to hear what their opinion is. I had them on, and because of that, those episodes in particular, those episodes were labeled as being dangerous. They had dangerous misinformation in them. The problem I have with the term misinformation, especially today, is that many of the things that we thought of as misinformation just a short while ago are now accepted as fact. Like, for instance, 8 months ago, if you said, if you get vaccinated, you can still catch COVID and you can still spread COVID, you would be removed from social media. They would ban you from certain platforms. Now that's accepted as fact. If you said, I don't think cloth masks work, you would be banned from social media. Now that's openly and repeatedly stated on CNN. If you said, I think it's possible that COVID-19 came from a lab, you'd be banned from many social media platforms. Now that's on the cover of Newsweek. All of those theories that at one point in time were banned were openly discussed by those 2 men that I had on my podcast that have been accused of dangerous misinformation. I do not know if they're right. I don't know, because I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a person who sits down and talks to people and has conversations with them. Do I get things wrong? Absolutely. I get things wrong, but I try to correct them. Whenever I get something wrong, I try to correct it because I'm interested in telling the truth.
Okay, so that was Joe Rogan's apology. And now I'm going to show you what Sam SEDER said on MSNBC. Yes, he went on to MSNBC to have this discussion. If that isn't the pot calling the kettle black, I think you're muted, JB.
I unmuted myself.
Oh, where did it go? Whoops, wrong one.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, guys. I clicked on the wrong one.
MSNBC.
Like, I couldn't believe. Hold on.
MSNBC. MSNBC.
He went on to MSNBC to have this discussion.
MSNBC.
Make this video.
Sorry, I'm just getting it to the right spot. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen.
What?
He went on to MSNBC. I wish I was like joking with you guys, but I'm not. So let me share my screen.
What?
Because I told you guys this before. Sam SEDER, if you look at he's been on MSNBC before as a contributor. He still has contributor in his byline, like his Twitter byline that says MSNBC contributor. So just remember that when you watch Majority Report, because those are the talking points a lot of times you're going to get. So let me go ahead and play this. He went on to Chris Hayes' show. I call him emoji because he reminds me of an emoji. Chris Hayes looks like an emoji to me. So here we go.
Or censored in any way. So what do you do with a host who tells tens of millions of viewers every week they don't need to be vaccinated during a pandemic? Michelle Goldberg is an op-ed columnist for New York Times. Sam Seder is the host of the podcast Majority Report with Sam Seder, and they both join me now. And Sam is a plucky, independent man I come to for entertaining conversation, but can't trust a word you say. What do you think about this situation?
Well, I should say, full disclosure, I tried to get on Rogan's show years and years ago because, to go on his show was to really help out your own show. At the time, too, I felt like he had a lot of right-wingers, a lot of libertarians on. Subsequent to that, he sort of announced on his show that he felt I was too harsh with right-wingers, so it didn't happen, but that was all well and good. But the point is, he's got a very, very important show. He's got a huge audience. And I think the thing that he doesn't fundamentally understand is that his intent is irrelevant.
Yeah.
It really is. And I actually think that, his intent isn't as bad as a lot of others, players out there, but his intent is irrelevant. He is spreading misinformation. Even in that Instagram video he did, the first 3 minutes are him trying to prove that misinformation doesn't even exist because there's been a changing dynamic with vaccinations and COVID over the course of 8 months, which of course, 8 months ago, vaccines did a different thing because COVID was a different thing. But he doesn't quite know what he's doing, I think, on many ways. I mean, he thinks he knows what he's doing, but he doesn't understand it from the perspective of the way that it impacts society.
Yeah, there's a kind of fascinating dynamic here. I mean, first of all, I should say that I sort of bristle a little bit at this kind of like call the manager liberalism you see sometimes, like, oh, that's misinformation. You need to like cut that person off. And so I'm generally still have a kind of sort of old school speech, more speech is better view. But one of the things that's a little weird here about this conversation, Michelle, is that and someone made this point on Twitter today, and I forgot who. It's being talked about like content moderation or something. It's like Spotify's just producing his show. They pay him $100 million. That's a Spotify show. If I say things on this network that are wrong or that are, legally problematic or slander, like, yeah, they come after my network, and my boss is like, that's how it goes, dude. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but people think they're in some world that they are not in.
Well, it's in the same way that you would go after Fox. I mean,
Right.
the right analogy is not YouTube, which just happens to have all this content on it, or Facebook and Twitter, and we could talk about.
And it's not like that's some, ethically compromised disposition for people to have.
Right.
Like people have that.
I mean, I should say, and in some ways, this pandemic has really left people to figure it out on their own. That as I got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because I was in the clinical trial, I figured out before the expert guidance that I should get the booster shot.
Yep.
So at the time, I was sort of.
So it's like, well, yeah, we're fact checking a podcast because the podcast is the product that we put out in the world. And the things we say in it should be true. And there's some level, like, we want to be like, oh, we're just having a conversation. It's like, well, if you say things that aren't true, like, you put that out into the world. That's the way this works.
Saying things that aren't true. Saying things that aren't true. Now, that's coming from someone who works at MSNBC.
Like your rap war? Like your rap war?
Russiagate?
Like Russiagate. Hold on. Wait. Pot, kettle, meat. Because let me tell you, isn't this ironic for you guys to be going after a podcaster, and yet you guys basically do the same shit and don't get any flack for it? Like, wait a minute. 200,000 minimum Iraqi lives. Minimum. And now you guys are trying to push us into a war with Russia? And you want to talk about Rogan? Look, like Rogan or not, whatever. I don't have a dog in that fight. I don't have a dog in that race. But look, when Sam Cedar said COVID wasn't doing that back then, what the fuck are you talking about? The Rona doesn't have a brain of its own and just changes based on political expediency and goes, oh, I'm going to operate this way. Like, dude, what are you talking about? And then on top of that, you're going to sit there and blame him, but at the same time, not talk about the misinformation that maybe even MSNBC's been talking about. Like, come on.
You guys see this? I'm gonna go back
Clownery,
in.
man. Clownery.
Yeah, and I say this as, you know, someone who most of my best friends are comedians. And so
Right.
there is this sense that because I'm not a journalist,
Right.
that
Yeah.
I don't have the same responsibility. And, you know, this can be deployed in more or less malevolent ways. You know, this is what.
I just want to point this out for you. If you look at the bottom of the screen, see how it says MSNBC contributor? Told you.
Oh, by the way, if he wants to basically uphold everybody as being a publisher as far as what we say, then he needs to also have a discussion with companies like Facebook and YouTube who control our algorithm. Because guess what? If you're thinking that, oh, well, we're going to have to control what we say as a publisher, then you're going to have to talk to those people too. But you don't talk to those people. Because the thing is so if we have to be treated like journalists, then guess what? Then YouTube and Facebook also need to be controlled like a publisher.
There you go. All right, I'm gonna go back in.
Limbaugh used to say, I'm just an entertainer. You can't take me seriously.
Right.
And the bottom line is, if you're talking to 11 million people every time you do a podcast, you have a responsibility. And if you're the company that's paying for it, it's on you. And he gets a Spotify paycheck. And so it's on them. It's part of their brand now that they are the ones who are publishing this stuff. They are profiting off it, and it is hurting people. And it's their responsibility, and it's their brand.
And the other thing about it too is, like, you can just talk about stuff that doesn't matter that much. You know what I mean? Like, that's the other thing. You can just choose to, like, talk about comedy or talk about, like,
he's in over his head.
Right,
on some
that's
level.
the thing.
And that's the bottom line. He's in over his head. He doesn't realize it. He's making too much money for them to tell him. And that's the bottom line. I mean, today he tweeted out, sort of gloriously, this AP story about ivermectin and a study from Japan. Well, 20 minutes later, the AP corrected its headline, and you never heard from him again about it. And so, this is a problem, and he doesn't want to take responsibility for it, and Spotify doesn't want to take responsibility for it, but someone's to blame.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, if you remember at the beginning of that interview, Sam Cedar said he tried to go on Joe Rogan's show. So what is this really about? What is this really about, Sam? If you feel that Joe Rogan's in over his head, he's, way in over his head, as he said. If you feel that he doesn't know what he's talking about, why are you trying to go on a show? I mean, we sat there, those of you that watched the debate, I watched a painful debate between Sam Cedar and Jackson Hinkle, and it was very clear to me that Sam Cedar didn't know what he was talking about. So if we're gonna point fingers here, I'm just saying, JB,
Is Sam in over his head? Look, everybody knows that Joe Rogan's not a journalist, right? But he does talk to different types of people. And I get that a lot of people are like, well, he has a large voice, and, people should be cognizant of that, and whatever information he puts out is dangerous. There was I know we have to be careful about different things. But Joe, I don't even know what to say anymore. I just don't even know.
I'll just say that, listen,
Like,
Black Eunuch Cedar acts like an obsessed teenage girl over Jimmy, like a crush gone psycho. Yeah, that's funny. I'll just say, look, Joe Rogan, I feel that Joe Rogan can talk about whatever he wants. Whether you agree with it or not, you don't have to listen to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has brought experts onto his show to have these discussions with them. It's not like he just woke up one day and was like, this is what I think is really going on. He's brought doctors like on the show. But this is the thing. They're complaining about Joe Rogan. They don't feel that he's spreading the right information. So they're calling for censorship. They want Joe Rogan to be censored. I don't believe in censorship. Even if someone's talking about something that I don't agree with, I just won't watch that content. But I don't believe in censoring people. We saw how that went after after Twitter censored Trump. And then it just went, down the road. There's certain things that we can't mention on here now. So I don't agree with censorship, period. And if you don't like what Joe Rogan's saying, then don't watch it. But you want to come at Joe Rogan for, they say he's spreading misinformation, but yet CNN lies to people 24 hours a day.
it's okay for corporations to do it, but for an individual to do it, then that's a big no-no.
Exactly.
It's like,
Exactly.
if you're going to be against misinformation, then be against misinformation. But the thing is that if you're going to be against misinformation, then you wouldn't have been able to usher in that Iraq war. You wouldn't be talking about Russiagate like crazy. And mind you, what did Rachel Maddow argue in court about her own show? What did her lawyer argue?
She said that it's infotainment.
Oh, infotainment. So then, if you're going to put Rogan under that scrutiny, then do the same thing to Rachel Maddow.
Yep.
Same thing. And yet, hold up. You're just gonna, without saying anything, hand off the show to Rachel Maddow, which comes on next hour at 9 p.m. on MSNBC, and not tell her, oh, you need to start being more responsible with your content? Because wasn't she pushing Russia, 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 Russia? And
Yep.
oh, rules for thee, but not for me. See, here's my thing. I want as accurate information to be dispensed as possible. Whether it goes against the wishes of corporations or not. But that's not how it operates within the capitalist system. Because the thing is that if it goes against the narrative that corporations want, then it's misinformation. But when it's corporations who actually want to push out the misinformation, then it's just a whoopsie.
Yep. And Sam Cedar is a contributor for MSNBC, which you saw right there in that video. It said it right underneath his picture. So he works for a network that also lies. So
He's getting the bag.
how is he going to come after Joe Rogan? I'm like, really? Really? You guys pushed Russiagate. Actually, Sam Cedar did too. If you go look on RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network channel, Nick did a stream about that. A stream showing a video of Sam Cedar pushing Russiagate. But you want to come after Joe Rogan? Really?
Sam, you really need to be careful with what you say. I think you should be censored for pushing that Russiagate that you did 3 years ago when you were guest hosting on Chris Hayes' show on MSNBC.
Yep.
Oh, but it's okay for you to push, something that's misinformation, but you see what I mean? See where I'm going?
You guys see the hypocrisy?
Oh gosh.
That's a clown show. That's a clown show. I can't even believe he went on there to talk to Emoji Dude about censorship, to talk about misinformation.
I don't care what nobody says. Chris Hayes is the halfway point between Sam Cedar and Rachel Maddow. If you look at them, they look like a sliding scale. Like he's smack dab in the middle. Got Sam Cedar going over to Rachel Maddow. Boom.
Oh my God, JB. I told you guys there's some weird people in the space, man. There's some good, genuine ones, but there's also some weird ones.